You're listening to episode 7 of the MicroProse podcast. Our featured guests today are Dan Rosenthal and Mike Faley from the 100th Bomb Group Foundation. We will also be speaking with Etherfield Studio about B-17 Flying Fortress, the Bloody 100th board game, followed by our top 5 Hall of Fame Kickstarter backer submissions.
Hello and welcome back to the MicroProse podcast. We are Dan Tozer and Nanci Knott, and today we have a very special episode.
Our featured interviewees are Dan Rosenthal and Mike Faley from the 100th Bomb Group Foundation. These two men serve as passionate stewards of World War II history and have been hugely supportive of MicroProse's B-17 projects of both video and board varieties.
After that interview, we'll shift gears into something more lighthearted, our recent conversation with Etherfield Studio.
Etherfield Studio designed B-17 Flying Fortress, the Bloody 100th board game, in partnership with MicroProse and with support from the 100th Bomb Group Foundation.
Today, we're not just talking about games, we're talking about real airmen and the real people who protect these heroes' stories.
You might already know how important the B-17 is to aviation history and to MicroProse's most beloved games, but you might not know that the 100th Bomb Group Foundation has supported, advised, and encouraged MicroProse during the development of some of our games, including this episode's featured game, B-17 Flying Fortress, the Bloody 100th board game. Dan Rosenthal is the son of celebrated B-17 pilot Robert Rosie Rosenthal. Mike Faley is an archivist and historian. Both Dan and Mike are heavily involved with the 100th Bomb Group Foundation, whose mission it is to preserve history, support veterans, and protect future generations from repeating the mistakes of the past.
We are privileged to speak with these two men who dedicate their lives to ensuring the stories of the greatest generation continue to be heard.
We're going to explore their personal stories and shared goals in order to understand the remarkable impacts of the 100th Bomb Group on families, veterans, and the global community dedicated to preserving the legacy of the Bloody 100th.
Dan, Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
We're honored to be with you.
To start us off, could you both tell us about the 100th Bomb Group Foundation?
It really began in the 50s with my father just reaching out to all of the veterans within the group to find out how they were doing, because back in those days with post-traumatic stress syndrome, it wasn't really known as that back then. So they only could rely on one another. And my father was quite well aware of that. And that's where it sprang from. And it began as an association. And then over the years, it developed into an incredible foundation. And people like Mike came on board to become one of the leading historians of the entire 8th Air Force. And I'm lucky to call him friend.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that intro. It started out as an association. A lot of the groups during that time period were only geared towards the veterans and their families. This was not the case with the 100th Bomb Group. They were inclusive versus exclusive. They allowed anybody that had a passion for the history of the 8th Air Force and the 100th Bomb Group to join their organization and be part of what they were trying to do, which was keep the legacy and the history of the bomb group and the 8th Air Force alive and well for future generations. And they wrote me in. They threw that line out there and they just reeled me right in. And I'm so happy that they did that. It's been a wonderful organization. I mean, the first time I ever went to a reunion, I walked into a room with 1,000 people in it, veterans, families. I had no family ties whatsoever to the 100th Bomb Group, nor does many members of the historical staff. We just love the organization and they make us feel at home. They make us feel as part of their organization, part of their history. And we're very honored to be part of that. But when I walked in that room with 1,000 people, I turned around, I go, I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time. I knew 3 people in that room. But I will tell you, those 3 people saw me, grabbed me, sat me down at a table. And at the end of that speech that was being given at that dinner, I was introduced to Harry Crosby, who was the group historian at that point in time, editor of Splasher 6, one of the few people that went front to back. In fact, the only person to go from the beginning to the end with the 100th Bomb Group. And when I introduced myself to him, he goes, "Oh, I'm going to take you around to everybody here." And he grabbed me and we walked around and he introduced me to every veteran he could find. And he goes, "You got to talk to this guy. You got to talk to him. He knows more about the 100th than I do." I'm going, Harry, I was so embarrassed. I was turning red. I wanted to dive under a table because here's the man that was there from front to back. And he's introducing me to every one of these veterans, putting his credibility on the line, saying they needed to talk to me about the history of the 100th and their stories. And I got to tell you, at the end of 3 days, I think I had whiplash to keep going with everybody that was there and meeting everybody. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
And we also have to remember that as the veterans were getting older, there was a divide within the group saying, well, the history should die with us. And my father and others said, absolutely not. This history needs to be preserved for future generations because, as so many of the veterans understood, if this is lost, history could repeat itself. And no one ever wants that to ever happen. And it's incumbent on us to keep that history alive and to continue to educate children and generations to come.
That first reunion I went to, there was a gentleman that was there. I believe his name was George Foray, Fory. And he was in the hospital prior to the reunion. And he told his family, "Get me out of here. I'm going to the reunion." And he came to that reunion with his family. And I asked him if he would sit down and talk to me. And he did. And his family's all sitting around him. And we started talking about events, things that he had gone through. And he started telling stories, and the families there with their jaws wide open, just dropping, going, "We never heard these stories. When we're growing up, our dad's never talking to us." And it's something that we found was prevalent with veterans that came back from World War II or any war. They didn't want their children to have to live the horrors that they saw. So it was very hard for them to talk about what they had seen. Remember, aerial combat at that point in time was a brand new form of warfare. It wasn't tried and true. It was
Trial and error.
It was total trial and error. And these guys were the guinea pigs. So how do you come back and tell your families what you saw and what you did when they have no clue or no reference point to go in there and understand it? So the only place they could tell that was at the reunions with their friends, with their buddies, with the guys that they flew. And here for the first time, and one of the first times, they're sitting down and talking to their family and telling the stories. And I found that very informative, number one, but it gave me a goal to go after, to get the stories, to get the history down, the stories that aren't written in the books that were part of the 100th and part of the 8th Air Force. And I've been very lucky to be able to do that and very blessed and honored to do it.
Can I put this into context? At the beginning of the war, it was really amateurs against professionals. We were the amateurs. The Germans were professionals. They were at it for a lot longer than we were. And when we came in, we're supposed to fly 25 missions. And the reality is that if you made it to 8, you were considered lucky. And anything after 8, you were considered dead. And those were the harsh realities that these airmen, these kids, were confronted with day in and day out. They were confronted by frostbite because of temperatures of 50 to 60 below. It's open windowed. You're surrounded by flak, the rockets being shot up, enemy fighters, crashes. What else am I missing, Mike?
Anoxia, oxygen. You lost oxygen. You were gone in 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's why they always did a check to make sure that the oxygen was working, and they would go around verbally to ask, and they would crunch out the ice crystals out of their tubes to make sure that it was working properly.
There was a lot of ways you could die. The only way you lived was completing 25 missions, or you ended up POW.
Yeah. And in order to make D-Day happen, the United States Air Force was demanded by the superiors to fly until there was total air supremacy. So within that 22-month period of time, the entire 8th Air Force, that's 40 bomber groups and 15 fighter groups, 26,000 men were killed in that 22-month period of time. That's more than any other armed services group in World War II.
Except for one, the German Kriegsmarine had a higher percentage of loss. But for the Americans, I mean, that's more than the Marines when you take it into context of what's there. And Dan's right. We were tasked, the 8th Air Force, U.S. Army Air Forces was tasked with the job of eliminating the German Luftwaffe. There was no way we could do D-Day without control of the air. And to this day, you don't win a battle without control of the air. You've got to have control of the air in order to win. And we needed that. So guess what? We were the bait. We were there to draw those fighters up for our P-51s, P-47s, P-38s to shoot down.
But before that, it was thought that the bombers could control the air and get dominance of the air. What we found out was, in the most cruelest of ways, with all of these losses and kids killed and POWs and wounded, we found out that without the fighters, the air war would not have been won. And as Mike was alluding to, was that the bombers, at a certain point in time, when the fighters were able to take us to and from the target, became the bait to lure the Nazis up, and so that our fighters could shoot them down. And then once that happened, then they were released to go down and shoot at the targets themselves. But it was a war unlike any other war. It ended trench warfare from World War I, the bombers did, but it took it 5 to 6 miles up above the earth. That's the hell that these guys were in.
The group went overseas and flew their first mission on June 25th, 1943. They got a sobering reminder that they were in a war. Up to that point, these are young boys going over gung-ho, never seen combat before, never been overseas, probably never been out of their state before. And they're going overseas to fight a war. And they're fighting a war in a combat zone that nobody's perfected yet. They're running the gauntlet. But on that first mission, the group loses 3 aircraft. That's 30 men that everybody knew there, because everybody trained together. Everybody was on that base, from the cook to the mechanic, to everybody, to the MPs, to the group commanders, to everybody. They knew each other. They knew if you were married. They knew if you had kids or not. And you just lost 30 of them, and they're gone in the blink of an eye. And that's a sobering effect. And that's really the first start point of how this group got its name, the Bloody 100th. It doesn't come till August 17th, 1943, on the Regensburg-Schweinfurt mission, where the 8th Air Force will lose 60 bombers. That's 600 men, KIA, MIA, POW, that are gone. The group loses 9 aircraft, 90 men gone on that. But that is the beginning of the legacy, the legend of the Bloody 100th, and it's only the beginning.
Our mission really is to preserve the legacy of our veterans, but it was that relationship between the planes and the men and the ground crew and all those that served on the base. You're looking at 2,500 people, up to 5,000, is it, Mike?
Usually about 3,000 to 4,000 people on a base at any one time.
And so you're looking at this enormous village, and everyone in that village on that base had a job to do. And it didn't matter if they were a cook, cleaning out the bathrooms, whatever their job was. Each and everyone's responsibility was to be done at 100% in order to ensure that these guys can fly the mission successfully and have the best chance at it. And as my father used to say, the planes could be repaired. So if the plane was shot up and no one was hurt, it was a milk run. Didn't matter how beat up, rocket holes, engines out, bullet holes throughout the entire plane. No one hurt, milk run. It's our duty and our mission to make sure that all of these gentlemen, these kids,
They were kids.
who served in the 100th Bomb Group are properly memorialized and remembered and having their stories shared and for generations to come, because they lived it. And we have to honor that and respect that. And that's our mission.
I think the other part of it is education, which is what Dan's talking about, or preserving the legacy that's there, but providing an educational outreach that teaches something that's very glossed over in schools these days. We're 80 years on from World War II, and we are still feeling the effects of it, and the geopolitical nature of things out there. You're still feeling the effects of that war and those political aspects of what took place during that point, during and after that war. So I think you have to teach the history of it, the consequences of it. I think it's an obligation you have to the guys that didn't come home, to the men that didn't make it back. And for the men that did make it back, their lives were for those guys. They got to live their lives. These kids were cut down at 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. Can you imagine being that age and having to go 5 miles high to fight for your life in sheer terror? It's astounding when you read the stories, or you hear them talk about it, and what they saw and what had to be etched in their minds, and yet still go on with the mission, still go home, still make it back to the base, and then have to do it again the next day.
Let me give you an example. We just lost our last pilot, John Lucky Luckadoo. And on one of his missions, a German fighter shot a bullet right through their nose of their plane. And what wound up happening was that it became a wind tunnel. And it was so cold that his feet froze to the pedals. And when they got back to the base, they were able to get his feet pried from there and thaw him out. And he was lucky, and very, very lucky. He didn't lose a single toe or foot or anything. But for the rest of his life, in bed at nighttime, he wound up wiggling his toes as he was taught in the infirmary. Those are the type of realities that these guys were faced with. And I think these are the type of stories that people need to learn to understand what these kids went through.
There's such a big difference between knowing abstractly that World War II happened and then having this very concrete understanding of the types of experiences that these real people, and like you were saying, very young kids were going through. That's why I think it's so important, the work you do with the 100th Bomb Group, because we do need people who are willing to keep telling those stories and educate people and have those community outreach programs. And I was wondering, just for the sake of that community outreach, whether you might be willing to tell us a bit about some of the resources, digital archives, or programs that you offer that you would like to let people know about?
Well, when we do reunions, we are always doing symposiums wherever we go. We were just over at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. And there we did many symposiums, but one of the symposiums subject matter is very dear and close to me, and that was to talk about my father and what he did after the war. He was a prosecuting attorney at the Nuremberg War Tribunals, and met my mom going over there. She too was an attorney. But the ramifications of combat to what occurred after the war and setting those type of things up are all tied into all of this. And much like how the POW experience was tied into our group experience. And all of these experiences led up to what these kids were dealing with and the harsh realities of what the Nuremberg tribunals shared and showed with the world was that the most horrific thing that could be done is crimes against humanity and war crimes. And the experience of World War II with our men proved that was the case.
I think the other thing you look at that we have is a website, www.100thbg.com. Has over 20,000 photos on it. It has the history of every one of the members of the 100th Bomb Group on there that we've been able to put together over the last 25 years in putting this history available to not only the families, but to other historians, to educational programs, kind of its own outreach for us to let people know that this exists out there, and we're not going to let that history be let go. The other thing that was very helpful to us on an educational purpose was Masters of the Air, the Hanks and Spielberg miniseries, which was based off of Donald Miller's book, Masters of the Air, and featured prominently the 100th Bomb Group as its subject matter, basically the anchor for the book and the main focus of the series. But it was also every group's story. Everybody had to fly in that same airspace. Everybody had to put their lives on the line, had to face the flak, the fighters. So the biggest thing for me seeing that was having members of other groups come in and go, that's how it was. That's how what went down. It may not be my group, but that's what I went through. And they were able to say that to their relatives, their sons. And for us, that's a great piece of history being out there for us. We have a newsletter that goes out to each one of our members. We keep in a very close ties to everybody that is part of our organization. We've informed them of events that are going on that they can attend. If a B-17 is out there flying, and on a tour, we want them to know about it. We make sure people are aware that there is history around them that they can take their kids to, not only on our website or our reunions, but in general to learn about what's happening, whether it be the Mighty Eighth Museum in Savannah, the World War II Museum in New Orleans, the Smithsonian out here, Pima Air Museum. Take a look at it. Each one of them's got a piece of history that you can take your kids to and make it an enjoyable day, but also in that process, they're learning a piece of history that's going on at that point.
In addition to that, we have our group is now reinstated back into the Air Force, and we're very fortunate. And matter of fact, on their planes, they have done the nose art that our guys used to have during World War II, and we certainly have helped them with their educational process, teaching these young flyers and airmen and women about their history. And believe it or not, it's not taught well enough in the Air Force, and we're happy to help within that endeavor. And certainly Masters of the Air was a sense of pride for the Air Force in their educational purposes.
And that unit is the 100th Air Refueling Wing out of Mildenhall, RAF Mildenhall in the UK. And they're an air refueling wing, tankers that refuel our fighters and bombers.
And we're still retrieving artifacts. It's just remarkable that we're able to find things over in Europe that Mike has helped unearth.
I'm about to retrieve one today from a gentleman that reached out to me over the last 24 hours and goes, Mike, this became available. It was offered to me. He goes, but I think it should go to the 100th.
Oh, wow.
These are relationships that you get over the years. And he goes, I think you guys should have it as much as I want it. He goes, I think it belongs there. And it's a Purple Heart. It's a Distinguished Flying Cross for completing X amount of missions. It's his air medal, one of his patches. And I was on the phone with the person yesterday, and after we get done here, I'll be wire transferring him money out of my account to get our hands on that piece of history.
Wow.
From that crew. But it always comes up. These things continue to come up for us. And we've been very lucky that we've created these relationships around the world that people know that if there's a 100th bomb group thing to be dealt with, these are who you reach out to. And we're very fortunate to have worldwide friends, including everyone from MicroProse, who is now part of the 100th Bomb Group family. And you are part of our family. And you're also part of our educational program because every one of those Flying Fortress games puts a new person's face in front of our history. When they see that square D on the tail of that plane, when they play that game and fly the B-17 or fly a mission or play the board game or anything that ties into aviation, we're educating a new amount of fans. I like to call them fans. But we're doing our part, and MicroProse is doing their part. And David's been very instrumental in that. You have a great owner that's there, and we can't say enough about what he's doing. He's got a comic book out there for the new game that's going to be coming with it if you ordered it. That's based off of the Regensburg mission. And he's done a phenomenal job with that. Again, another aspect, not only the game, but there's a comic. That's a whole new avenue of people that will be educated on the 8th Air Force, on the 100th Bomb Group, and the B-17.
And our hopes is to drive people who may get turned on by this to our website to see our video archives, which is outrageously a huge amount of videos. You can certainly find out about the main characters from Masters of the Air and all others in our group. But we welcome people to come in, to learn, to ask questions, to even join us at our next reunion. We'd love to be able to meet new people who have similar interests, who want to learn more and may have other stories that relate, might not relate, but we're always interested in learning about that. And we love that when this occurs.
Another thing that we are doing is getting displays inside museums. We have a display that's going to be put up in the National Museum of the Mighty Eighth. That's going to be a immersive artifacts, history, everything. It's going to be part of that museum. We're also going to be part of the 390th Museum, which has a section in there for the 13th Combat Wing, which the 100th Bomb Group was part of, with the 100th, the 95th, and the 390th. So we're trying to get more of our history out there and tell that story through the artifacts that we've been able to procure over the years. And the other aspect of it is the 100th Bomb Group Museum at Thorpe Abbotts in England, where this is where the 100th flew from. They have an incredible museum there. They're adding on to it right now. And people go over there each year on tours that are being done. And they are the Rolls Royce of museums, for 8th Air Force museums in England. They are the top of the line. So everywhere we try to make ourselves available and out there as much as we can. There's also a museum that is in Krvarska, Czechoslovakia. On September 11th, we lost 12 aircraft. And over this one small town in Krvarska, most of them crashed. And there's a museum there to the crash sites that one kid put together from his time in high school. He heard about the tale of a 100th Bomb Group plane crashing into his school. And they found part of the guy's jacket inside the heating system in the school. That stayed with him throughout his lifetime. And he built a museum, state-of-the-art museum in Krvarska, Czechoslovakia, behind the Iron Curtain at the point when he was growing up. And it's to memorialize that mission and our boys that got lost or had to bail out on that time. And there is one person still unaccounted for on that mission. And we know where he is, where the plane went in, and we just got to get the DPAA to go in there and excavate. But that, again, is part of what we do, is to bring our boys home if we can.
You've also both had the privilege of attending many reunions and events over the years. Do you have any moments that have really stayed with you?
There's a few. One of them was actually Dan's father. We were at a reunion in the late 90s in Salt Lake City, it was Salt Lake City. And Gail Buck Clevin came to that reunion. Gail had not been to a reunion in decades being there, and he is one of the legends of the 100th. And he came in there, and Dan's father put his arm around him, and all these people came up to take photographs of him. Now, here's a gentleman that Dan's father flew 2 tours of duty, broke the same arm twice, won every award except the Congressional Medal of Honor. Very unassuming gentleman. Yet he puts his arm around Gail Clevin and goes, here's the real legend of the 100th. That's the type of person he was. It was always about somebody else, not himself. But it was the moment that he was giving props to somebody that went before him and was out there. They only flew on one mission together, and Gail got shot down on it. And that was Bremen in October of 43. But that one I remember a lot because it was the only time Gail came to a reunion. He's very much featured in Masters of the Air. And at that moment in time, that's a special moment that 2 very big legends, the 100th, got together. And it wasn't, I'm going to one-up you or I'm more important than you. It's giving props to each other and really, basically giving Gail his just due for being there. And, I'm standing on your shoulders. You set it up for me by the time I got here. And it was one of those wonderful things to see. There's a few other ones though too. Here's a funny one for you. I was doing the book on High Noon at Hasselun. It was on the Berlin missions on March 3, 4, 6, and 8. And I was interviewing the crew of Our Gale Sail. The book is based around the Bob Showen's crew, which flew Our Gale Sail. And their ball turret gunner was huge, probably about 6'2", and he's in the ball turret. Now, if you've ever seen the ball turret on a B-17, it's not really big at all. And this gentleman's in there, and he grew up smoking cigars. So whenever he'd finish a mission, they'd get down below 10,000 feet. They would come off of oxygen, and smoke would start wafting out of the ball turret into the rest of the plane. And the guys are going, what is that smell? I smell a cigar. We're at 10,000 feet. What am I doing smelling a cigar up at 10,000 feet? And they look over, and there's he's in the ball turret. You're seeing the smoke billowing up from the ball turret. And he's in there smoking a Winston Churchill stogie instead of thing. Not a small cigar, the fattest, thickest cigar you could find. And he's in there smoking it on the way down. Same thing with his radio operator gunner. They did a drawing of him with just a steel helmet and 2 shoes hanging out of it. And they go, that's what he was like when flak hit. He ducked under that thing and got himself as small as he could to be in there. But these were some of the things within the crews. Each one was his own character. He had his own story. But they knew they had to work together as a crew. Because if they were going to make it back, they were going to have to fight their way back. Each person was going to have to do his job in order for them to survive. And that's why you would see a lot of survivor's guilt on B-17 crews. If somebody didn't fly a mission and that crew didn't return, they held that for many, many years. Survivor's grief of maybe if I was there, that plane wouldn't have went down. Maybe if I was there, that fighter wouldn't have gotten them. And we had a gentleman on the Murphy crew who finished his tour of duty 1 mission earlier. He'd flown with another crew. And on the Thomas Murphy crew, which flew Piccadilly Lily, he had finished 1 mission early. The next day, that crew went out. They were not supposed to fly, but there were so many losses, the squadron commander asked them to fly 1 more mission. And they didn't think anything about it. They were going home, but they didn't think anything about flying another mission. That crew gets shot down. That's the mission that John Luckadoo had that wind blow through there and hit that thing. It was the same mission. He saw that crew go down. When the planes came back, the gentleman's name was Albert Davis. He cried. Ken Lemons, who's also in Masters of the Air, that was his plane. They were just standing at the hard stand. Ground crew looking up, waiting for the Lily to return. The Lily never returned. She never came back. And that We met Albert Davis many years later, and he still cried when he talked about that mission. It still haunted him that maybe if I flew that mission, that crew wouldn't have went down. And these are the tough things that you get from the reunions. They'll tell you the funny stories and things, but it's getting that story out of them. That to me tells the story of the air crews.
I can certainly relay this conversation that I had with my father, and that was when the group was decimated. The barracks, the crews the orderlies would come in, or the crews would come in and take out all of the foot lockers and all of the belongings of the people that were shot down. And my father was alone in the barracks with all of these rolled up beds in there. And it was the most lonely, horrible feeling that he had, knowing that he was surviving and that all of the others are lost. And those are the realities of war and that war. And how to internalize that enough so that you can get ready, mentally ready, to do it again, to go up again and again.
And that same effect that Dan's talking about had an effect on your ground crew. Remember when I told you when they went overseas, they knew everybody in the group. They knew all the families. They knew whether you were married or not. After those first crews went down, the ground crews never got close to the air crews again because it was too hard. They felt the whole base felt that pain from those initial crews going down. They did not want to get close enough to another person or get friends with another person because you're going to get shot down. You're not going to be there. That reality's set in with them. You maybe got to know the other crew that were in your bunks, but you didn't go beyond that. And if it was a brand new crew, nah, you didn't get close to them at all because you didn't want that hurt of seeing them go down. And that went to the ground crew also. And they had to clean out the planes. They had to clean out the blood, the guts, what was left of some of those airmen that were left in those planes. They had to go in and get them ready for the next mission. It was a tough job.
In addition to that, these ground crews, they were the silent heroes. They didn't get the attention that the pilots and the crews got. But these guys worked around the clock. There was times during the winter where there was 3 feet of snow, and they were working throughout the night to get the planes ready for the next mission that next day. I cannot heap upon them enough praise and thanks for their efforts that they've done to get these crews ready to go into battle again. And that's how it was on the entire base.
When you really spell out the realities, it's absolutely heartbreaking. What kind of impact have you seen the 100th Bomb Group have on the veterans themselves, having that community to be a part of after having gone through all of these experiences?
Therapeutic.
Very therapeutic. And I can give you a story of how therapeutic it was. 40 years after the war was over, they had a reunion and all of these veterans were there. And then this one veteran who had never been to a reunion decided to come, and he was very depressed, very distraught. And the veterans formed a circle with this guy, and they were giving him the floor and wanting to know what was going on with him. And he began to break down. And he was in between his tears and his sobs. He said that he was a waist gunner, and he was following a German fighter, and he was shooting at him, and he had strafed the plane next to them. And he swore that he had killed some people on that plane. And he had carried this guilt with him for 40 years, as I said. And they consoled him and assured him that those type of things did occur, but it wasn't his fault. It was the nature of war and the horrors of war. Those are the realities of war. Having this burden lifted off of him. He became somebody who was able to contribute to his family and to his business and other things once again. But can you imagine carrying that around for 40 years?
It's having an organization like this allowed not only the veterans, but the family of veterans to understand more so what their father was like when he came back from the war, trying to understand his mood changes or being on edge, and they couldn't understand it, because again, nobody's telling any stories. You didn't have the VA where you went in there and you had PTSD and they were treating you for it. You sucked it up. You either sucked it up or it drove you crazy or it destroyed marriages, and it did all of those things.
And in addition to that, every veteran before World War II to wars going on today, they will tell you that you don't come out unscathed. And that's the reality of it. And that's why our group is so important, because as Mike alluded to, is that this, through our foundation, we're able to tell families the stories when the veterans were not able to reveal that to their loved ones. We're here as the gatekeepers of that, and it is our duty to pass these along to their families and to whomever else is interested in that. That is our obligation, and that is our calling, why we do this.
How has being part of the foundation impacted your own lives?
Good question. A greater understanding of what freedom costs, not only in the thing of human lives, but the mental aspect of it, and how it carried through to the other families that are out there. And to a degree, as a person, it makes you want to stand up, to do what you can for others, to go in there and do what maybe they can't do, or provide something for them, some type of relief, whether it be a moral support or information support or whatever. It allows you as an individual to maybe even step up a little bit more than you already do. You can make a difference. It may not seem that way, but in an organization like that, everybody not that has a job, but I think a responsibility that they might not even know. They might not even realize, but it comes to them at some point that they're going to do the right thing at the right moment in time because of what they've learned and or experienced through the organization, through the foundation.
It's inspiring and empowering.
I don't think I could have said it any better.
I will tell you a story of a veteran. He flew 49 missions, 2 tours. He flew the first tour and he didn't have to sign up again. He could go home. He was done. And he made up this story. And he said, well, my other brothers were in the service. He goes, so I couldn't come home and still have them in the service and not go back in there and do something. I flew my missions and doing the thing, and he flew on the Berlin missions. He flew on some harrowing missions. He took an 88 shell in his radio room that blew the radio operator out of the room. Literally made the man a sieve and went out the side of the plane without a parachute. Plane should have broken in half, and this pilot brought them home. He was coming up with the story, and I went to him. I go, you signed up again. And he goes, you had an abort on one mission. I go, did that prompt you to sign up again? And he just looked at me like a surprise on his face. And he wouldn't say anything. And about 2 hours later, he was having a cigar and a scotch, sitting down. He goes, Mike, come on over here for a second. He goes, you were right. He goes, everything else was a story. He goes, I didn't know whether the abort was because of a mechanical failure, which I perceived to be, or it was lack of moral fiber. Did I not have the guts on that mission to fly because of previous missions? He goes, I had to prove it to myself. He proved it to himself by flying another tour.
Wow.
Yeah. His daughter didn't even know that story. Didn't tell her that till after her father had passed.
He was a wonderful man, John.
Unbelievable. But that one moment in time, that one bit of what he perceived as weakness, he couldn't allow to stand. So he had to find out for himself. He went on to be a colonel in the Air Force, stayed in the Air Force, became a colonel, and had a great career. Great person going in there. But one moment in his mind, he couldn't rectify it. He could have went home with that, but he didn't want to live with that. That's the type of courage it sometimes takes from a personal standpoint to go in there and step up to prove to yourself that, you know what, it was mechanical failure or it was this, but in his mind, he had to make sure. I'd say 49 missions pretty much prove that.
I would say so. Oh my goodness.
Truly.
Also, Dan, on the subject, we can't have you on the show without asking about your father, because he was one of the most remarkable pilots to fly with the 100th. What was he like as a man, not just as a legend?
My father was my best friend growing up. He was remarkably funny, witty, probably the smartest person I've ever known as well. And, he was a product, like all of these gentlemen were, of the Great Depression. And he had to learn how to work at a very early age. His father had passed away when he was in law school. He was the first to graduate college in his family. Tremendous football and baseball player. His love of life always came through, and his love of family and friends were always foremost there. So I did have the opportunity to talk to him about his war career. And the one thing that we discussed, I asked him what was the one thing he couldn't shake from the war. And he said it was the smell of burnt flesh. And, that was very moving. He would also talk to me about the Munster mission. And you can talk about it. But until what Masters of the Air showed us, what it was like inside the plane, the hell that these guys encountered, it broke us. It broke my family. We were in tears. And all we wanted to do was to give my father a hug at that time and say, we understand. So as a father, as a role model, as a person, he was everything to me. And if you had met him and had a conversation with him, you would have felt that he was your best friend.
He always praised everybody else. Even though he did it, everybody else got the praise for it. And it took a lot to get him to talk about himself and or what he experienced. That's what I remember the most. There's one interview he did called From Brooklyn to Berlin. If you ever get a chance, it's one of our things on the website. You watch that interview. They ask him 3 questions. And for the next hour, he tells you everything you need to know about Robert Rosenthal. But I will tell you, there's only one reason his father survived Munster, and nobody else did. They all got shot down. It was because of his training. Before he went overseas and became a pilot for a bomber, he was flying tow targets down in Sebring, down in Florida, for gunnery practice. And when they weren't doing gunnery practice, they were doing fighter tactics. He flew that 17 like it was a fighter that day. That's the only reason they survived, is because he had that added training that nobody else did or would take that chance of flying like that in a B-17 and bouncing those guys all over the plane just to get them to survive.
And you have to recall that there were 2 engines out. He had a rocket hole through the wing and guys severely injured. And he did violent maneuvers. He did chandelles and lazy S's and other things that only a fighter pilot would do. And no one before or since did in one. It was a remarkable piece of flying ability.
When I talked about earlier where him and Gail Clevin were together, in Salt Lake City. When Gail passed away, Rosie came up to me and he goes, Mike, are you doing the obit for Buck? I go, yes, I am. He goes, get it right. Nothing else mattered but getting it right. And that went for getting his story right, giving him his just due, but always getting the history right for the group.
And how I got involved in the group was when my father was on his last legs, dying. He came over to me and said, would you mind working for the foundation? It's awfully important to me. And it's been my greatest honor to do that for all of the men.
That's really beautiful. The way you speak about your father and the way you articulate the experience of having watched Masters of the Air, knowing that that's the thing that, sorry, I'm crying. I'm having trouble speaking right now. You really moved me. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing that with us. It is really special how games and other media like Masters of the Air or the B17 games can really tap into that emotional engagement. These media forms can reach people who might never pick up a history book, who might never have an understanding, who might never have that experience of feeling empathy for people who went through these really intense experiences that literally changed the world. How important do you think it is to bring World War II stories into modern media? And do you think it helps preserve history in a way that's accessible?
I think our foundation puts a human touch on our storytelling. And it is vastly important to put that into context because war removes that usually. And by putting that in there and bringing these stories to life, to remember these heroes, all of them, is our duty. And we, I think, do that as well, if not better, than anyone else out there. And I owe a great deal of debt to everyone that has worked on the board, our family members, and everyone else who has had input into preserving the legacy of this group.
If these games instills in a person, even one person, to ask a question, to go down that rabbit hole, it's a success. Anything over and above that is a big success because that game got a person to ask a question about the history of the 17, of the people that flew it, the people that perished in it. And it takes on a whole new meaning, whether they're playing the game, looking at the comic, looking on your website, wherever they go, if they ask the question, what happened in World War II in the air war? Who is the 100th Bomb Group? Who is the Mighty Eighth? Then it's successful to me. And that's why I like the tie-in for all of us that are here doing this between the 100th Bomb Group Foundation, MicroProse. That association is going to open up a lot of doors for people to find out more about World War II. And I think the more you understand World War II, you will understand a lot more about history in general of the world.
And what we want to do is we want to invite people to come to visit the 100th Bomb Group Foundation website and to perhaps even join the foundation in order for this legacy to continue on so that future generations can learn. And that's our primary goal.
If someone listening today wants to support the foundation or learn more about the 100th, where should they go and how can they get involved?
We welcome people to come to WWWI 100th BG Foundation, to come to our website. We have a donation link there. We have a store where you can buy shirts and other things there. And by the way, everyone that works on the foundation is a volunteer, everyone. And that's how we've always done our business, and that's how we will continue to do our business. Great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren are now becoming members of the foundation. along with historians and Air Force personnel and other people who are just interested. And we welcome everyone to do that.
Dan, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today and for everything you do to preserve the legacies of the brave people whose stories you keep alive. We really appreciate your time. It's been amazing hearing from you.
Well, thank you for having us. We're really honored to be part of this, and we feel blessed to be able to speak to you today.
It's the board game. It's the board game.
Today we have 3 special guests from Etherfield Studio who are here to invite players to step into the boots of a World War II bomber crew. B-17 Flying Fortress, the Bloody 100th Board Game Edition.
A tabletop world of tactical metal and communication under fire, which Etherfield Studio have created in partnership with MicroProse. Lajos Tihanyi is the lead designer at Etherfield Studio. He is a creative by profession and an incurable dreamer at heart. He holds degrees in arts and computer science and is also a fine arts theorist who has studied graphic design. His professional experiences include serving as a project manager, web designer, and junior art director, among other roles, all while working on analog and digital games as side projects. He is currently doing what he's always wanted to do, develop games. Dávid Csobay works as a writer and designer for Etherfield Studios. He also works as a translator, as quality controller in state subsidies, and as a bartender for fun. He has an MA in literature and linguistics and also studied cultural anthropology and religion. Dávid is the introvert amongst extroverts, and the other way around. He has a passion for good reads and for good chats in pubs. György Péchy is a producer and project manager at Etherfield Studio. He brings over 20 years of experience in IT, animation, cultural projects, and game development. His earlier work as a YouTube specialist brought valuable insight into digital media and audience engagement. As a game producer, he's dedicated to fostering collaboration and bringing creative visions to life.
With their powers combined, Etherfield Studio have created B-17 Flying Fortress, the Bloody 100 Board Game Edition.
Welcome to the podcast.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Welcome. So what first inspired you to create B-17 Flying Fortress, the Bloody 100th?
The background of our inspiration started as a commission from MicroProse. MicroProse created a lot of fun games in this genre, like the B-17 Flying Fortress and the Mighty Eighth, and so on and so on. This was the first point when we started to work on the project. But as we progressed and as we delved into the historical part of the bomber and the crew and the plane itself, which is a miracle in itself, we started to believe that's a much deeper understanding of the bomber's crew, and later on became the inspiration for the game.
Nice. So what other games have you designed, and how did your experience from those shape this one?
Our first game as a group, as Etherfield together, as a development team, is Drop System Breach, which is really far from board games and from bombers, which is a tactical action hacker game. It's like a cyberpunk cinema game. And we had a lot of experience with digital development before that as well, and role-playing game development as well, which is kind of similar in this creative industry in many, many ways. So that was our first published game, and we tried to build our previous experiences with board games and role-playing games to build into this board game with the B-17 bomber.
Can you walk us through the earliest days of the game's development? Was it a passion project that evolved, or was Etherfield always planning to tell this story?
As we started to work on this project, it was a cooperation with MicroProse. The source of this game is their B-17 Flying Fortress PC game. It's a digital game. So first we had to play with that game a lot and analyze that game. Of course, we played the original version back in the days, so it was quite interesting to get back those memories as adults, and we tried to get back to the same feeling and same experience as we had before, but in a professional way this time. So we tried to examine how these planes worked, how the crew worked together, and then based on all our experiences, we pitched several ideas to MicroProse. I think there were 3 or 4 different versions of this board game. Each of these versions, the plot and the focus of these pitches was a little bit different. And then with MicroProse together, we choose the one we felt that would be the best way to put that PC game into a board game.
Etherfield's stated goal is to create games that stay with players long after the game ends. What about the Bloody 100th do you think achieves that?
First of all, I think anyone who loves corporate gaming and is interested in World War II games and likes action-packed board games, they will love this game. The main strength of the game is the mission events, which are randomly generated from different decks. Each mission will be completely different with different challenges. We have thousands of hours in testing, and we didn't run into the same mission once. And we structured the game that it becomes more and more challenging in the campaign mode. So once you start a campaign, the first mission will be relatively easy. In the end, you will be lucky if you get back with your plane and with all your crews intact. So during all the missions, the whole team controls the game and how they develop during the missions. And based on our test game experiences, different players remember different missions and situations, but it was always like remembering a good movie experience. Once they get back into the airfield with the plane intact, but the other time their ball turret gets blown off, and that's made the mission completely different and more difficult. So there are a lot of situations where the board game players will find it really movie-like experience.
We had these test groups after playing the sessions. Even after a week or so, they recollected some events from earlier games, like, oh, that was a fun thing when the engine was blown off and things like that. So it creates memories with players.
It says a lot about the narrative strength of the game that you're able to create that reaction in players.
I'm not sure if it's a narrative strength we created. I think it's a narrative strength of the B-17 bomber thing, flying through the clouds and then delivering a bomb and fighting aces is really a thing that people remember. And I think that they have now the chance to live through it.
Beyond the historical setting and themes, what part of the game are you personally most proud of?
I think the best part of the game is the random mission generation, because it keeps the game exciting in every mission. Every mission is different. Our game is a rather complex game, but also with the rule sets, it doesn't become too complicated. We try to show every aspect of V-17 life, from takeoff to the life of the bomber crew and the bombing and the landing. And we try to put everything into this game without being too complicated. And I think we succeeded with that.
How does the game handle solo play? Is it manageable for one player, or is there a lot to juggle?
Solo play is usually a lot to juggle. I think we did a good job here, so it's not that difficult as in other games. This is a cooperative game. It's 1 to 4 players, and you manage a total crew of 10 airmen. And when you are playing 4, you have to coordinate between yourselves. And when you play alone, you don't have to coordinate, but you have to make all the decisions. So I think it's not difficult, really.
Can you simplify the core gameplay for those curious about how a typical mission actually unfolds?
The core gameplay is the bomber is flying through 9 stages of the mission. 9 stages of the mission are from takeoff through landing, and in the middle there's the bombing run. On top of the board, you have 9 stacks with mission cards. So the players draw from these mission stacks the cards that represent the events and the threats in the mission. These can be weather, or these can be enemy fighters or flak bombardment. So these mission cards are played. They deliver their effects, and then the crew has to respond to these, trying to solve the issues, shooting down enemy fighters or evading flak or repair damages and stuff. So first the mission unfolds, then the crew reacts, and then again the mission, then again the crew, through 9 stages. Each stage is around 3 turns, so it's basically around 30 turns that you have to play.
We try to simulate a lot of combat situations in the air and on the ground as well. But the basic mechanics are coherent and straightforward. So with a little bit of practice, it's really easy to understand and really easy to play.
The game lists 1 to 4 players and emphasizes cooperative play. How are the turns structured, and will solo players find it as satisfying as those playing with a full crew?
Solo players will do the same things as a full crew. Basically, you have a crew of 10 airmen on board, and whether you play it alone or with 3 friends, you have to manage the same 10 crewmen, and you have to do all directions. So every single turn of the game, the 10 crewmen do 10 actions and move 10 times. You can always opt not to act with one, but you have the same actions in all turns, whether you are 1, whether you are 4. The crewmen are grouped in 4 sections, being the nose of the bomber, the flight deck, the middle section, and the tail section. And so when you play 4, you manage a section. And each of these sections have special roles, and they have there are special points in the game where they have the limelight. The nose does the bombing and also the navigation. Yes. The tail does the gunnery, defending. So the tail has a role in air fights. So 4 players will have phases in the game when you are in the center. And if you play around, you are always in the center, but in different roles. At the start of the game, you have to mainly focus on flight deck actions. Also, in the bombing run at the center of the game, you have to focus on nose section. So it's going to be as fun as with friends. You have 4 sections with 10 crewmen, and if you play 4, we emphasize that you need to communicate between yourselves and need to be a crew as players. If the tail section wishes to shoot down some enemy fighters, then they probably need to tell the flight deck to move in a certain way.
Just like you would in real life, I guess.
Yeah. So if you are the kind of guy who likes to cooperate with your friends, then team play is going to be fun. And if you are the kind of introvert, then a solo play is going to be fun.
You've got both extroverts and introverts in your team. So it seems like in the design process, you probably spent a lot of time talking about the different types of play styles that different players have and how each of those play styles can be encapsulated in one game. Is that more or less how you went about things?
Yeah, that's correct. Also, we are very lucky that we have a good entourage of people. So the test players came from among friends, and we have a good collection of people with many different play styles and tastes. So it was really helpful for us.
Oh, that's good to hear. The title, The Bloody 100th, carries enormous historical weight. How did you approach creating a respectful game about such a harrowing part of history while still keeping it engaging?
Games with the historical background, always the hardest part is to find the balance between complexity and playability. We wanted to have it all, like have everything about the B17 right, and also to create a very enjoyable and playable game. So we, mostly Lajos, study the plane and the historical parts very carefully. I mean, hundreds of hours just to find out how the game interior looks, where are the bolts, where are the sections. We read about the crew, how they managed to work on the plane together, how those missions historically took place. So we try to incorporate all of these things to this game, but of course, we had to make compromises because it would be impossible to put everything into this game. Of course, we could do that, but in the end, that would mean that only 2 or 3 people in the world wanted to play with this game.
Yeah, we didn't want to make a hardcore game or a hardcore simulation.
It's more like a cinematic version of the historical facts. If we wanted to stick to history, the ball cannon operator couldn't move at all because he was trapped into a very tiny place during the whole mission, and he couldn't do anything but fire the cannon. And we wanted to make it a little bit more fun. So the ball cannon operator in our game can move because it makes it enjoyable. It's not just more accessible to a wider audience, but at the same time, it's respectful to the subject, which I think is really important, because there might be a lot of players who are interested in being respectful because one of their grandparents flown on these planes or something like that. And we communicated all these things in the rulebook. And in the rulebook, we add some additional texts, which are also part of the history. So you can also learn how these planes worked and how the crew worked together just by reading our rulebook.
We got some material from the 100th Bomb Group Foundation through MicroProse, and it really helped us connect this thing to real people. I mean, we are in Hungary. We've been Axis in the war. We do not have a first contact with B-17, but through the material that we got from MicroProse, from the 100th Bomb Foundation, it helped us really find touch with the B-17 thing. And we also Googled around and made our research on the internet. And it's really a wonder of mechanical engineering, I think. And then what we read about the cruise, it's really a wonder of disciplining people. And when you are a few thousand feet in the air in a can, really, you have to rely on your comrades, and these stories are really inspiring for us. So that's why we wanted to show in the game. We do have German friends, and we know them; they are good people. So we wanted to show in the book that it's the idea that is the enemy and not the people. So we included in the book some things that show that even German soldiers were people, and they did what they had to do. It's not necessary that they were evil. So we wanted war is an evil thing, and we wanted to show that even in war, there are good things. That's what's important for me.
Is there anything in particular you'd like to mention before we go?
We did not know before we did our research, but there was a song, Lili Marleen, which was a German song, and the German radio played it every evening. And it was so popular. The Allies also listened to the Axis radio. And this Lili Marleen was so popular, even with Ally soldiers, that everyone knew it in the war, it seems. It was really a good find to see that even in war, even when you're killing each other, you are the same people, and then there is some camaraderie between enemies as well.
That's actually really touching. Would you mind sending me a link to that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that we are really grateful for MicroProse giving us the chance to develop this game. We had a lot of fun. We learned a lot. So that was a really interesting experience, and we do hope that the players will see in the game as well. And of course, we have to thank the 100th Bomb Group Foundation as well, because they provided excellent materials for this game. We used a lot of their stuff to go on and to research the material deeply. And of course, I just want to mention that we are just 3 of us sitting here right now, but there were nearly 20 people who worked on this project, from the graphic design section through art to all the testers. So we are really grateful for them as well for their work. And it was also really great to see this project on Kickstarter. And we are really thankful for all the backers. Without them, it would be nothing. So we are really thankful for them as well. And I hope there will be more people, because there are some more days left in the campaign. And everyone will receive their game next year, and they will be really happy about that. And they will play a lot.
I'd also like to thank the backers, not only for the backing, but also for the ideas they give, and for all the questions. And thank you for all.
To the entire Etherfield team, thank you so much for bringing this game into the world. And to the 3 of you that are here with us now, thank you so much for the chat today, and all the best with this game and all of your future games.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Today's mystery segment features our top 5 backer contributions from the B-17 Flying Fortress Bloody 100 board game Kickstarter Hall of Fame.
Unfortunately, we can't share everything in this episode, but if you find yourself on the Kickstarter page, please take a moment to explore the full Hall of Fame video, and feel free to leave a kind word of appreciation to the backers whose creativity makes this community unique.
Without further ado, here is the Kickstarter Hall of Fame Top 5.
In 5th place, we have Jose Vasquez.
This is B-17 Lucky Strike Radio. In hostile zone. Light anti-aircraft fire. Formation holds course. Target in sight. End of dispatch.
In 4th place, we have Bertold Virag.
Name, Burt McLeod. Role, Tail Gunner. Defining trait, Precise Shooter. Catchphrase, Hold Fast.
3rd place goes to Craig Tompkins.
Ally Command, this is Crossfire Unit. Received and understood. Transmissions ready. Awaiting further orders, over.
Captain Craig Ironhand Tompkins. Role, Pilot. Mission Commander. Defining trait, Steadfast Leadership. Never loses focus, even when the engines stutter and the sky turns black with flak. Catchphrase, Engines first, fear second.
In second place, Jason Youngdale.
B-17 door gunner. Name, Staff Sergeant Silas Chapman. Catchphrase, hot brass and cold nerves, that's my job. B-17 pilot. Name, Captain Jason Youngdahl. Catchphrase, we're bringing this bird home in one piece or 10,000. B-17 tail gunner. Name, Sergeant Matt McDonald. Catchphrase, no one sneaks up on my fortress.
And our number one submission comes from Arid Dyer.
He is known as Flight Lieutenant Eugene the Aubergine Stephen Haynes. He smokes a pipe and was a college tutor before joining the USAF as a volunteer. He takes his job as a pilot very seriously. He reads Eric Ambler novels between flights. What he has seen in the war has changed him. He plans to give up academia when the war is over and move to a warmer state where he can set up a farm and grow vegetables for a living. He is thinking of South Carolina, but dreads the thought of looking for suitable properties in case he doesn't make it out of the war. He struggles socially and doesn't have a girlfriend, although he'd dearly like one. He plays board games as a hobby with his younger brother who suffers from a mild form of Asperger's. The time and family views don't allow for an emotional link between the boys and their parents, so they are very close to each other. They write to each other every few days, and Steve, his brother, idolizes him. The nose art and name comes from a time that Eugene was reading Machiavelli whilst in college. Renaissance Florence and its intrigue really stayed with him, and so, when he was commissioned, he made a special request to have this painted on the plane.
We'd also like to make a special mention to Charlie Haynes for his photography, everyone who submitted nose art, and all the other amazing contributors whose work you can find on the B-17 Flying Fortress The Bloody 100th board game Kickstarter page. And now it's time for
Game Reviews.
Once upon a time, there was a man named Colin who was struggling with a career he wasn't enjoying. He wanted to explore game dev, so he started learning Unity. One day, Colin made a prototype game in which the player must complete humorous tasks with a helicopter. It was fun, but Colin realised that it would be even more fun with the addition of guns and missiles. 5 years later, Cleared Hot was released into early access, and we all lived happily ever after with our helicopters, magnets, and rope. The end.
We had a lot of fun playing Cleared Hot, and based on the reviews we've seen on the Steam page, so has everyone else.
One of our favourite Cleared Hot Steam reviews came from an account called Grim Daddy, who had this to say. Attention! If you are a huge fan of the Desert Jungle Urban Strike series from back in the day, just buy it right now. That way, you don't need to read the rest of this review, just thank me later once you play your new addiction. This game is pure 90s helicopter fun, dressed up in sleek 3D, but plays just like the old 2D games did. The controls are precise and each airframe feels meaningfully different. All of the weapons have their differences as well, and finding your perfect loadout is part of the fun. One of the biggest additions from the old strike formula is that you can use your winch to lift just about anything, including many enemy vehicles. This combined with the physics leads to great fun flinging baddies about. This was just a short excerpt from Grim Daddy's full review, but if you want to read the rest, you can find the link in the show notes.
The premise of Cleared Hot is very similar to Colin's prototype. You fly a helicopter, completing various tasks.
The controls were easy once we got the hang of how to space the aiming cursor, and the gameplay was very engaging. We especially enjoyed the voice acting and the novelty of the missions.
We were going to review this game ourselves, but then we decided an imaginary conversation with Travis, the character we played as, could be even more fun.
Disclaimer, this is not the real Travis. Any resemblance to characters, fictional or otherwise, is not accidental. Cleared Hot team, don't get mad, we love your game.
Hi, I'm fake Travis. And I just got done fixing up a farm, replacing gas tanks while trying not to make it explode. I blew myself up, but the farmer was patient. I hadn't even encountered any enemies, and I was already exploding. Then I found an entrance, and the farmer was very happy with me and told me to scare some dudes. But I did one better. I picked them up with my rope, and I threw their car, and they all went splat. Mission success. Or so it seemed. There was one dude left, so I had to go back and kill him too. All in all, a pleasant day for a Chick-fil-A.
And that's all from us today.
The MicroProse podcast will be back next month with more exclusive interviews, gaming news, and, as always, a brand new mystery segment. For more information about the 100th Bomb Group Foundation, Etherfield Studio, B17 Flying Fortress, the Bloody 100th board game, Cleared Hot, or any of our featured guests, check out our show notes or go to microprose.com.
And endgame.